This is a hitbox controller, and it has been the talk of the town within the FGC for a little while now. With new players, old players alike, everybody is getting involved with the hitbox in some way, shape, or form because of the advantages that it gives you. You've probably seen the shortcuts you can do on this thing, like Guile's Divine Super, where you can do all this flashy stuff, and then Guile's Super comes out faster than it probably ever should, and that one's cool and all. It's flashy, it's probably fun to learn. The more useful ones, though, however, are probably like DP from crouching. You can do down forward, kick or punch, and then you'll get a DP. And then there's the fact that your directionals are on actual buttons, so it makes execution a little bit easier, right? If I do this, I'll get a fireball every single time. There's no chance that I will undercorrect or overcorrect on a lever and not get the special move that I input. But the one advantage that I don't think enough people talk about when it comes to the hitbox, because you really wouldn't feel it until you sat down and played with one, is the movement. Let's take walking and blocking, for example. If I'm walking and blocking on a lever, I have to do down back on a lever, then I have to go to neutral, then I have to go to forward, then I have to go back to down back, and I have to keep doing this over and over and over again as I'm walking and blocking, and there's a lot of travel time in my lever. It takes time to go from down back to forward. On a hitbox, because it's just 2 or 3 buttons that you're using when you're walking and blocking, it can go as fast as your fingers can go, basically, right? You do forward, down back, forward, down back. It's very quick, because there is no travel time. It's just buttons. What this does is allow you to take your space or adjust your spacing much easier and a little bit safer, because the time that you're standing and you could be clipped by an attack is shorter. It's smaller on the hitbox. A great example of this is Alex Myers playing Chun-Li. If you ever watch him play, he adjusts his spacing so quickly that it looks like Chun-Li is spazzing out, barely standing up and then going back down, standing up and going down very quickly. And to the untrained eye, it looks like he's trolling, you know? It looks like a joke, but it's actually him just micro-adjusting his spacing, right? He's spacing himself to either whip punish or to be in a spot where he can press a button and then immediately get back to charging. And on a character like Chun-Li, where you want to get into a spacing where you can either whiff punish or poke with your big buttons and then immediately get back to charging so you can have all your special moves available, the hitbox is very effective because you have no travel time going from neutral or forward back to down back in order to begin charging again. And you might say, well, how much could that really affect things? How much could going from neutral to down back, that tiny little few milliseconds, really mean? Or going from forward to down back, how much could that little time really mean? Well, on a charge character, where we're talking about moves that take a second to charge, those milliseconds matter. If I'm walking forward and I go down back on a hitbox, my move is going to be ready sooner than it would be on a lever, right? It's just a time difference. And a quick side note on charge characters, if you happen to play one that does a standing move into a down-up charge, for example, that little trick, it's much easier on the hitbox because you're not like whipping your wrist around or anything like that. You're just holding a button, releasing a button, pressing another button, and then pressing one more button. And that's it. It's very simple. Now, to everybody out there who plays a character with average or good walk speed on a character, we'll say Ryu or better, right? Your baseline could be Ryu's walk speed, and then anybody better than that. If you play a character like that, you will notice a real difference in the way that you move around in neutral, and especially when it comes to doing things like inducing a whiff, right? So let's say you're playing a Jury who is just mashing stand medium kick. You know they're going to press stand medium kick as soon as you get into range of it, and you need to find a way around it. Usually, you would walk into range, and then you take a slight walk backwards and make that button whiff, and then you get a whiff punish. When it comes to walking into that space and then making that tiny little minute movement backwards to make the button whiff, the hitbox is very good at tiny movements like that, and you will notice it. And that kind of movement is a lot easier on the wrist when it's buttons and not an actual lever. And that's speaking from somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience playing stick. I played on it for maybe a couple months. You know, I don't have 20 years of experience built up playing on a stick and like making tiny little movements like that. I find it much easier on the hitbox. You know, if you are somebody who has played on a stick for 10 or 20 years, there'll be a bit of a learning curve, right? There'll be a little bit more of a learning curve because you're going to have to break some bad habits that you have from playing on lever. Or not even necessarily bad habits, just some habits that you have from playing on a lever you're going to have to break in order to adjust to something like this. If you're a new player, you know, relatively new, I'm sure if you're watching a video about a hitbox controller, you're pretty well accustomed to the FGC at this point. But if you're looking to switch over to this from like a keyboard or a pad or something, it will be a little bit easier for you, especially keyboard. If you're playing on keyboard and you go over to a hitbox, it's pretty much the same thing, you know, same layout. just a lot more ergonomic and a lot easier to use because the buttons are so big. Other things you'll immediately notice in neutral is that your dashes are a little bit faster because you're just tapping 2 buttons, you're not doing forward. There's even a shortcut that allows you to do an instant dash through the hitbox using some SOCD stuff. That stuff is pretty useful in Street Fighter. I'm sure it's even more useful in anime games, right? For all you Guilty Gear players out there. Whatever you play, that shortcut is probably pretty useful to you. And then there's your character specific stuff. I play Cammy, for example, so TK dive kick, you really have to get that down. Once you get it down though, it's not super hard. You'll see me mess up the dive kicks a lot, but that's just stuff you have to lab. The input for that isn't crazy either. It's like up forward, or here I could just show you, I guess. It's up forward, so that would be these two, and then just quarter circle back and then kick, right? Then you get your dive kick on Cammy, for example. Stuff like that is not super tough, but it does take a lot of practice. You have to sit in training mode and do it for a little while, and eventually once you get it, like most things, it's second nature. But that's the one reason why I think you should switch to a hitbox. You know, the shortcuts are cool or whatever, but the movement is just chef's kiss. It is it is wonderful, right? It's very good at small but meaningful movements, and it just feels very intuitive to have everything on buttons. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and I'll talk to you again very soon.